We continue our discussion on workers' compensation by talking about some of the employer and employee responsibilities following an accident. The employee should be advised of the employer's expected safety rules and regulations. This is part of accident preventing, since if there is a knowing refusal to follow safety rules and regulations, there can possibly be a 25% reduction in the employee's workers' compensation benefits if an accident does occur. The injured worker has 30 days in which to advise the employer of the fact that the accident occurred. Employers should be clear on who the authorized doctor will be should an accident occur. Likewise, if the employer expects to implement a drug testing program, the employees should be specifically advised of this. Once an accident does in fact occur, the employer should be aware of what actions should be taken. There are some very definitive procedural requirements which should be followed in detail by the employer. Failure to follow these procedures can result in substantial fines and other penalties. Within 7 days of a knowledge of an accident, the employer must report to the carrier notice of injury on a specific form provided by the Division of Workers' Compensation. Failure to report this injury to the carrier may involve up to $2,000 of fine per occurrence. First aid cases requiring treatment on site do not require medical treatment for which charges will be incurred and do not disable the employee for more than 7 days, do not need to be reported. It should be noted, however, that the accident does have to be recorded on a notice of injury. If the case later meets the reporting requirements, the notice of injury must be filed within 7 days after the employer has knowledge of the change of status. What this is basically saying is if it's a first aid case like where a Band-Aid was applied or something like that, doesn't have to be reported to the carrier. However, you still have to do the paperwork and keep it, because if that wound becomes infected or if it needs follow-up medical care, it is going to end up being what's considered a change of status, and that does have to be reported within 7 days. The Florida workers' compensation laws also require reporting of an on-the-job injury or accident resulting in death of an employee within 24 hours to the Division of Workers' Compensation, Bureau of Industrial Safety and Health in Tallahassee. It should be remembered that the employer is responsible to notify the carrier of an accident and must also notify the Division of Workers' Compensation of a death. Employers must retain a copy of all information contained in the first report of an accident, including the actual forms, for not less than 2 years and 6 months. Any violation of the rule for reporting accidents can subject the employer to a penalty of up to $500. If an the employer is also required to report to the carrier the employee's wages in order for the carrier to compute the workers' compensation benefits. The extent of the worker's lost wage benefits are determined based upon the wages of the employee for the 13 weeks preceding the date of the accident. If the employee did not work for 13 weeks preceding the date of the accident, then the wages of a similar employee are used in calculating the benefits payable to the injured worker. If there's no similar employees, the actual full-time wages based on the contract of employment will be used to determine the amount of benefits payable. For injuries occurring after July 1st, 1990, wages include only the actual wages earned by the employee, plus employer-provided health insurance and permanent housing. If the benefits of the employment, such as health insurance, are continued after the date of accident, which the injured worker is recuperating from the injury, then the employer does not include the value of the health insurance in calculating the weekly wage. Ordinarily, it is irrelevant how the accident occurred on the job. Workers' compensation benefits are payable even though an accident is caused by the employee himself. An exception to this, if the claimant intentionally injures himself, like as in a suicide, or is injured as a result of being intoxicated or violated a safety rule for failure to use a safety device. Basically, therefore, workers' compensation is a no-fault system. Realizing the no-fault characteristic of workers' compensation, it is generally not important how the accident occurred. The important question is, did the accident in fact happen on the job? Therefore, it is not important for the employer to determine exactly how an accident occurred, except, of course, to prevent future or similar accidents from occurring. The employer, however, should be aware that the fact that an investigation should be performed to determine if someone else caused the injury to the employee. If this occurs, then you have a right to obtain back from the negligent party, not a coworker, the amount of benefits you have to pay under the workers' compensation system. Employers should investigate how the accident occurred only for the purpose of trying to collect back benefits they are required to pay out under the Workers' Compensation Act. It is also important for the employer to keep in touch with the injured worker after the injury occurred. Statistically, it has been shown that early and continued contact with the injured worker significantly reduces the period of disability and minimizes litigation. The employer should keep in contact with the treating physician to coordinate the injured worker's return to work.